But thanks for the invite this morning. And can I say at the outset, thanks for your hard work. I'm a really big fan of URBACT, mainly because any project it touches or pursues is always grounded in concrete ideas, and there's always concrete actions emerging. I think that's important, that these journeys that you go over the 2 years, that there's something you get, that everybody gets something from it at the end of the process, and also that there's a sense of that the knowledge is shared to other regions as well across the EU, and working together is really important. Collaboration is really important, and I completely buy into what Pedro was saying the last few minutes on the importance of community and getting to know each other, the importance of neighbourhoods. And it's something that the Committee of the Regions has been championing for quite a while, that whatever work we do across the European Union, it must reach the people on the ground that actually matter, that it mustn't be kept in towers in Brussels or within a space. This is actually the Committee of the Regions building in Brussels, where I spend a lot of time in. But pre-COVID, I was sent on a lot of field missions right across the EU, so from the Atlantic to Eastern Europe and from Scandinavia to Malta, and I was kind of very much exposed to different ideas and the different challenges that actually exist. I'm also really thrilled that the Urban Agenda Partnership of Security in Public Spaces is involved in this URBACT project and driving this URBACT project. I think the partnerships of the EU Urban Agenda have so much to offer the European Union project, and I've been heavily involved in promoting that at COR level. So what I want to do over the next 15 minutes or so is to maybe speak about a little bit what the Committee of the Regions tries to do and what it's championing around the urban agenda. I want to say a little bit about the EU Urban Agenda itself, and I want to say a little bit about kind of security and where the Committee of the Regions is at when it comes to opinions on security in public spaces and generally on terrorism and counter-terrorism. I'm not the rapporteur or the opinion maker on aspects of security. I don't sit on the committee that security sits under within the Committee of the Regions, but I do sit on the committees that oversee kind of European funding, structural funding, and also smaller funding like URBACT, Interreg, Horizon 2020, and trying to drive some of those community projects forward. If you're unfamiliar with the Committee of the Regions, there might be some people on the call that are. It's a formal EU institution. It's made up of 324 representatives, and there are 9 representatives from Ireland. So I'm in my second mandate on the Committee of the Regions. I'm an independent councillor in Cork City Council in the south of Ireland. We represent 1 million politicians, local and regional politicians, and also represent the 280 regions of the European Union, so at NUTS 3 level. I think that's important to tell you, and also very important to tell you that the COR is an opinion body. So it gives opinion papers to the European Commission, the European Parliament, and for the most part, the European Commission take our ideas on board. It's a harder sell sometimes to the European Parliament, but we've got really, we've been working hard the last few years to build up our partnerships with other EU institutions. We do believe in a citizen-led vision, kind of giving a bottom-up kind of perspective. What does 280 regions look like mapped? Well, here you go. So when we're in the Committee of the Regions, we look at a map and kind of look at these sort of sub-levels and what's going on in the different regions. Why am I showing you this map? Well, we're very, very lucky in Europe. Yeah, there is diverseness of the geographies, and there's a lot of uniqueness as well in terms of the geographies and the cultures and in different regions and cities. But also many of the issues and challenges remain the same. So when it comes to economic challenges, the economic fallout from COVID, they remain the same. Competitiveness between regions remain the same. The passion of the local and regional authorities that represent the people remain the same. Involving citizens, that idea kind of remains the same. And looking at, I suppose there are many cities. I always remind my own city council in Cork, there are 500 cities in Atlantic Europe. You can imagine the amount of cities right across the European Union, and they're all actually competing against each other for commerce and investors and so on. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on that as well. In terms of our work, it's very deeply influenced by the regional disparities within member states, social cohesion disparities, territorial demands for infrastructure, calls for investment in innovation, broadband, the need to respond to climate change, creating solutions to cross-border challenges, enhancing the quality of local and regional governments, and also looking at this EU post-COVID narrative and what sort of world we're going to emerge into. We try to turn our problems into opportunities, which in one sense this URBAC project is also trying to do. And that you're taking the challenges and you're trying to spot the opportunities. You're trying to take the ambition and turn it into growth and stability. And we, in the Committee of the Regions, we speak a lot about added value. Now, some of these colourful pictures you're seeing are actually pictures from Cork. So my apologies to Longford. I've actually snuck Cork into some of my presentation, and they don't connect to my narrative. And they're just, a lot of the pictures actually show the importance of geography, community life, and people getting to know each other, which I completely agree with and buy into. In terms of the added value paradigm for the Committee of the Regions, now I suppose I'm going through this in a very whistle-stop way. One could actually spend hours and hours looking into each one of these, but the Committee of the Regions, we do very much buy into the sharing of best practice and knowledge. And we see borders as frontiers of ideas. So not something that just shuts things down, that has an openness there. We're about inclusiveness and partnership, about dialogue, diversity and unity, and cross-border and interoperability, that ideas can kind of cross borders. And if you plug these thoughts into cities and regions, like acupuncture pins, and the reason I use that word acupuncture is that I have a lower back issue, and I get acupuncture once a week. And the thing about acupuncture is that it doesn't shift the muscle in one go, in one session. It actually takes a while to shift your muscle around. And if you put in the pins in certain locations, it moves things along, but not quickly. So it's a slow evolution. That we need an evolution, not a revolution, in many of our cities and regions to bring people along with us and get citizens involved. So if you plug in different thoughts on inclusiveness and partnership and dialogue, you get something where the cities and regions are the future of Europe. We are laboratories, we're learning platforms, we're test beds, we're champions of thinking beyond GDP, where we think in terms of being innovators. We're thinking of where we use a lot of place-based thinking, we have flexible networks of growth. And while all of these might look like buzzwords, they're really, really important for cities and regions to move towards, especially place-based thinking and involving citizens and testing ideas on the ground, which your URBAC is also about testing ideas and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and then coming up with a set of actions. We have a lot of toolkits at our disposal. In other words, we collect a lot of information. So it's not a case of we go to a meeting and then we talk and nothing kind of comes out of that. So the COR member is a valuable asset. There are local and regional councillors, regional parliamentarians from across the EU. We do a lot of opinions. Our opinions are like toolkits. They're like best practice examples, setting out best practice examples. We do have a huge interest in the role of managing authorities of structural funds, especially now going into the new cohesion policy duration. Huge interest in European regional development funds, huge interest in knowledge exchange platforms, Interact, URBAC, the Urban Agenda, even other urban networks that actually exist out there. A huge interest in working with the European Investment Bank, a huge interest in working things like the Covenant of Mayors. So it's not just, I suppose, a partnership with citizens, it's a partnership with other bodies and agents as well across the EU doing kind of different things. So you can see it's a vast chessboard of different partners and different things happening. Our campaigns of recent interest, one would be like defending cohesion policy, the Green Deal, the future of work, smart cities, breaking silos, constructing quadruple helixes, promoting the SDGs. And there's a lot within all of those, and we've done opinions in all of those. But I just want to zoom in on the cohesion policy. And one of the big changes coming up for local authorities is that for the first time ever, there will be a territorial kind of objective. So it is very much targeting the urban neighbourhood, the administrative unit of a city, a town or a suburb. And that's a really big deal for smaller urban spaces like Longford, or we say a European third or fourth tier city like Cork, city where I'm from and where you're from as well, I think from many of your cities, that this funding needs to reach the people on the ground and not just be kept in the capital cities. So there is an increased focus on sustainable urban development. That 8% of the ERDF, the European Regional Development Fund, is going to be focused on urban development. So ring fence for that. That's important for funding wise. It's also important for funding for the partnerships of the EU Urban Agenda. It's important for funding of URBACT, so that funding actually is given over to some of the actions that you may come up with and other people will come up with as well in other URBACT projects. So sustainable urban development has become this key feature of the ERDF going forward into the next term. And as I say, it's positive for smaller administrative units. It's also, there's now an importance being drawn more and more to integrated territorial investment, that managing authorities will be allowed to mix financing from different resources. And that's important if you want things happening on the ground. Also, there's a renewed focus on the importance of community-led local development like LEADER projects, which are huge actually across Ireland. And I've no doubt probably in areas of Longford as well, that this funding is very, very important for just smaller projects that need funding, that don't cost an arm and a leg, as we say in Ireland, but just small funding that's important. I'm also a big fan as well that every local authority should have a European officer, a European funding officer / policy officer. I know we've got one in Cork that's very, very active. Probably Lorraine is probably the one perhaps in Longford if she's heading up this particular project. And they're just so important in local authorities. There's so much on this slide. But again, I just want to point out to you that there's a lot of urban thinking going on out there. The approaches to our cities has radically changed in the last 10 years. And we're trying to play catch up, as actually Pedro very much said, which was at the core of his presentation. We're trying to play catch up to citizens' needs, catch up to urban practitioners screaming at local authorities, why aren't you doing that? Catch up to the political needs of mayors and regional presidents, catch up to the needs of cities and regional networks. National governments are trying to roll out national planning frameworks, trying to play catch up to what the EU Urban Agenda and the partnerships are trying to say, catch up to what the European Investment Bank are trying to say. And then you've got this huge build-up of the importance of multi-level governance, exchanging knowledge. We must know think in an integrated way. We need to have cross-cutting synergies. We need to urban proof. And the list goes on. We must have the SDGs. So there's this whole chessboard. So there's much ambition out there. And the urban agenda does capture a lot of that. In fact, it probably reinvented a lot of that as well. The last since 2016, since the first EU Urban Agenda partnership was actually launched, and that it's trying to capture the experience and expertise of urban authorities and trying to capture the weight of the 14 action plans that have emerged from the 14 thematic partnerships. And of course, each one of the partnerships is highly important. I've actually met most of the coordinators of each one of the partnerships. And most of the partnerships worked for 2 years on their particular topic, came up with an action plan of maybe 10 actions. And each one brings something really special to the table and something really important. So just because security and public space was the last one to create it, that doesn't mean it isn't as important as the ones that were created earlier on, like housing and jobs and skills. They all bring something to the table, and they all kind of put a focus on better funding, better regulation, better knowledge. And they are doing fantastic work. I have seen the impact of the partnerships on thinking within the Directorate General of Regional Policy within the European Commission, or DG Regio. I have seen the impact, because I've also been involved in trying to drive it forward. I'm a rapporteur for the CUR on the implementation of the EU Urban Agenda, and I've been involved in so many discussions the last 2.5 years. But one of the great things about the Urban Agenda's approaches and the partnerships is that they champion multi-level governance, that it can't be just this top-down experience, that it must have an element, there must be a strong element of bottom-up experience. Whatever we create, there must be a sense of user-friendliness with it. And knowledge exchange is so key kind of going forward. We cannot resolve some of Europe's biggest problems alone. We have to work together. And from my experience on field missions, there are so many great people out there like your good selves doing fantastic work. And it's important that people like yourselves keep meeting around the table and keep working towards solutions. The urban agenda is going through its own transition at the moment. The German presidency late last year, they introduced a thing called the New Leipzig Charter, or the renewal of the Leipzig Charter, which was created in the late 2000s, and then over 12 years later, has come up with a new charter. But it's about, this charter was signed into place at the end of last year, and it is about consolidating and delivering the urban agenda for the EU. So 14 partnerships, 14 action plans. I'm a firm believer that those 14 action plans should not sit on a shelf and gather dust, that you must do something with the action plans. And that's why I'm delighted that the Urban Agenda Partnership, Security in Public Spaces, is linking to an URBAC project and much more. We must keep reinforcing the idea of multi-level and multi-stakeholder cooperation. We must keep trying to achieve better regulation, better funding, policy coherence. We must keep going and pushing for better knowledge and stronger communication, and also try to improve the governance around the partnerships as well. And they're all big issues that are being, even as I speak, being worked through by the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. So as part of, I suppose, the Sustainable Urban Fund, and as part of the cohesion policy, the European Urban Initiative has emerged very strongly over the last 2 to 3 years. And there's like 400 million euros put aside to drive some of these urban agenda, European urban initiatives, to support innovative, tough and realistic actions. And you can see that there's a real need to support capacity, knowledge building, but you can see here actually in my third paragraph here that the importance to link with URBAC, which is, as I said at the start, is grounded in concrete steps and ideas. Security and well-being is something that the Committee of the Regions has spoken about in a committee called Civics. So let's go on a little bit. You don't need to see much of this yet. So Civics is the Commission for Citizenship, Governance, Institutional, External Affairs. So apart from we champion like cohesion policy and the EU urban agenda and much more, we also actually have a commission or a subcommittee that actually looks at the field of the protection of public spaces and the prevention of radicalization, especially since the 2015 terrorist attacks in Paris. And we've done a number of, the Committee of the Regions has done a number of things. Number one is that it adopted opinions. So there was one opinion on combating radicalization and violent extremism, and the other one is on the action plan to support the protection of public spaces. We've organised events with DG Home, the European Commission's DG Home. We recently responded to another communication called a Counter-Terrorism Agenda for the EU, Anticipate, Prevent, Protect and Respond, which I'll get to in a second. We're currently doing an opinion on that. And we've also we've signed up to the EU Pledge on Urban Security and Resilience. So there's a strong support there by the Committee of the Regions. Just the first opinion on combating radicalisation. I just want to give you the core message there from that opinion was the need to invest in prevention work rather than pursuing a solely reactive punitive policy. And that connects into what Pedro was saying kind of earlier on. We've done a second opinion of the action plan to support the protection of public spaces. So you can see here the importance of local elected officials in increasing public awareness, the importance of a balance being maintained between preserving individual and collective freedoms, the importance and the aim to maintain open societies and accessible public spaces on the one hand, and the other trying to make sure that there is necessary lawful proportionate, appropriate to circumstances, measured, reversible and limit and approaches as well. Now, the most recent thing that we're working on was just published last week. So this is the Counter-Terrorism Agenda for the EU about anticipating, preventing, protecting and responding. Now, all these, this opinion and the two other opinions, I can send on to this URBAC committee if you want to, there's no problem, or you'll find it on the Committee of the Regions website as well, and many of this work, much of this work. The Committee of the Region, so I just want to give, there are just 3 short slides before I conclude on the way the Committee of the Regions is thinking towards its counter-terrorism agenda for the EU, and the anticipate, prevent, protect and respond. So we do believe in the strategic intelligence and the assessment of threats, reinforcing early detection capacity, staying ahead of the curve. There's a role for new technologies in terms of prevention, countering extremist ideologies online, supporting local actors for more resilient communities. Prisons rehabilitation and reintegration is important, consolidating knowledge and support. Protecting people in public spaces. Cities is the backbone of urban security, making critical infrastructure more resilient, the importance of border security, and denying terrorists the means to attack. And respond, strengthening things like Europol, law enforcement cooperation, strengthening information exchange, supporting investigations, prosecution, and strengthen support to victims of terrorism. Now, what I've just said there over 4 slides, the anticipate, prevent, protect, and respond, they're all actually fleshed out in a 50-point opinion that the Committee of the Regions has put together, and it will go to a plenary session later on this year with kind of more information on each one of those points, and even more. Okay, so let me conclude, because I've just thrown at you a vast amount of information, a vast chessboard of information. But there is a very strong role for managing authorities of structural funds and the local and regional authorities to work closer together to make sure that funding that is put aside for all matters of urban thinking gets to the ground. There is a stronger role to play for local ecosystems in terms of working together. I think the one thing that COVID has done is brought us even closer together. Now, I do think actually neighbourhoods and communities have been brought together more so than ever before. The question is, will those stay together as the years progress? I don't know. There's an active role there for all of us to play to make sure they do. Partnerships are important, so things like the URBAC partnership that your involvement is in. Do not underestimate the power of bringing people from different parts of the EU around the table and trying to come up with a coherent and an action plan that everyone can buy into. That's not as easy as it sounds, because people come from different backgrounds and approach their cities and regions differently. There's certainly a need for more joining up with the dots. I've no doubt that in your URBAC project you've realised that there's many pieces that are scattered all over the place, and some pieces you'll use, you'll pick up and you'll look at, and some pieces you actually won't. But there is a huge need, and there's a lot of opportunities there to scale up. I think one could look at a bottle half full or half empty, but I think you need to look at it as half full and kind of build from there. So those are just some ideas. Anything that I've said there in my presentation, if you want if I refer to a report, if you want that report, please email me and I'll send on the report. There's no problem at all. My gut is maybe the opinions might be of use to you to unpack some more of the opinions of. I say the opinion documents because I see the Committee of the Regions opinions as toolkits. They kind of give you the most up-to-date narrative and what's actually going on and the up-to-date actually thinking. And they're also quite short and succinct. They don't go on to hundreds of pages. Opinion documents are usually 4 to 5 pages long, and they just get to the point. They get to the point. So I hope that's of use to you. So kind of give you the bigger framework and then kind of zooming in on some of the smaller framework. And the Committee of the Regions is very much committed to promoting URBACT. And very much committed to defending cohesion policy, making sure whatever funding is available actually reaches the people on the ground. And even we're in a huge debate at the moment to make sure that the resilience fund, this emergency fund, actually reaches cities and regions as well, to try to make a difference as much as possible. Because I think that's why we're on all in this as well, just to try to make a difference as much as possible. So thanks for the invite again, and thanks for all of you.